we'll use this as an example, but I feel like it could apply across the board. You talked about how others are hunting kind of the standard of the big blinds, the feeders, the food plot, and the swamps. What have you found differently? Like what do you, I know it's probably very different depending on each deer, but give a little bit of insight, like how you're hunting this deer and then how you're hunting some of these deer in general.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I know the deer will not come to feed in daylight. And all these, most, not all of them, most of the guys have feed out, corn feeders, whatever. He will not come to a corn pile or a feeder in daylight, period. He will come in dark, and I think that gives people hope.
Yeah.
Is that, oh man, if we can just get a cold front, he's gonna come in, or he's gonna mess up and come, but he will not come to feed in daylight. So, well, always and never, right?
Yeah.
He has not done that I have seen on or heard, because they run a lot of cameras in the swamp, and quite a few people know about this deer, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds of pictures of him, and they're all at night. The way I have looked at it, Bo, is kind of my system or philosophy on whitetail hunting, especially where they're really pressured, is you have the first thing you have to do is get them to move in daylight, right? To kill them, you gotta have them moving in daylight. Simple, common sense. When is the best time for that? So there in my mind, there are two periods. We start August 15th. So there's still some bachelor groups going on there. They're velvet. They haven't been hunted in 6 months. Now we do get guys that come down and start doing stuff 2 days before the season, and it kind of warps them a little bit, but you have an opportunity then. So I will try and find natural food. We get muscadines. We get a few sawtooths that'll start dropping. We get the edges of some of those cutovers that have some catbrier and stuff. So I will try and find some early season food that he naturally browses on, especially if we get muscadines or a wild grape. I don't know if your listeners will know what muscadines are, but anyway, we get a good quote unquote hatch of those right around the beginning of the season. And if you can find a big grove of those, man, that is like crack to them. They'll come to that naturally. So we'll try that early. And then what I have done over the last couple years is really focus on funnel type settings, and especially as much time as I've spent with Bobby over the last few years. You know, he's 72 years old, mountain man, big woods, rut funnel, just figured out how to hunt the big woods and how to hunt rut funnels and identify funnels and get trail systems that all converge. And so I'm able to kind of parlay that into some flatland stuff, find some big ditches, some oxbows. And then what it's going to boil down to is I've got two of those spots that over the last 3 years I've had cameras in, and I've gotten 1 or 2 daylight pictures of that deer going through those spots. So I've already set one of them up. I've got 2 more to do, but I'm going to do some brush and some hinge cutting in those type areas. You don't have, on public and stuff, you can't cut, but you can stack brush, move limbs and that sort of stuff just to tighten them up. And what I mean by that, there's like a big oxbow in the lake, in the river, where the river bends and shifts deer travel. But then there's a big drainage ditch that comes off of it too. So it pinches it down on 2 sides. And then there's a fairly new cutover on the other side that, he's not going to want to walk in, especially in daylight. And so in that little run right there, I can tighten it up with a little bit of hint. And there's 5 or 6 trails that go through there that are pretty heavy trails. And I'm going to be able to tighten them up just with some hinge cutting and stacking some brush. And so I'll have a north wind and a south wind stand. And in those 3 spots, I'll have, some cameras in there. And then it's just going to take persistence, man. I'm just going to have to hunt those spots. The bouncing around doesn't work. Trying to find where he beds doesn't work. He's bedding everywhere and anywhere. You'll get a picture of him over here, at night, and you're like, okay, he's bedding in this big cutover. And then it'll be over here right at daylight going into another area. So he's nomadic, and that's what's kept him alive. So I feel like really deep down, the way to kill him is to be persistent in 1 or 2 spots. and just stay there, stay there, stay there. And when the rut gets going, another time when they are prone to move in daylight, I'm going to, if I have the ability and the right wind, I'm going to be in, one of those two funnels, even though it's flat land. And I think that's my best crack at getting him. If I don't get him early season on some natural food, then it's going to have to be a real persistent grind struggle to kill him coming through one of those funnels.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. I felt like it was just not that long ago that I heard of Bobby Worthington, and which is, I mean, I've heard a lot of the older guys that have been pioneers in this space, and I came across some of Bobby's stuff, and I've heard the name, but I didn't know a whole lot about what he was about. And I watched a few videos and listened to him talk, and I'm like, man, it makes so much sense. It was funny. I've told it on here before, but when I was younger, I would find these rut funnels in the big woods, and just because I'd only have a couple of spots I'd find were good, but I'd sit there for the whole week off that I'd have, and I'd always get an opportunity. And I started getting information, other podcasts and videos and stuff from anything can work in different areas. I'm saying, specifically to what I was doing, I started bouncing around a lot more, and first sit, best sit, all this stuff. And it was like, during the rut, that just doesn't work in the big woods. Like it just, or in areas like what you're talking about there. And it's like, before I knew all this stuff, I was better at it then. And I went back to doing that and putting it in cycles of like, it's hard, especially when you scout a bunch of places, or you have a bunch of what you think are good spots, that you always think that next spot's better. At that point, it's just a mental thing of being able to sit in those places. And I like the way that you just explained it there, and also the way that I've listened to Bobby explain it. I got to buy his book yet. That's one thing that I want to do and read it.
I'll send you one. We ship all the books out of my warehouse. So I can, when we get off here, just text me or message me your address. I've got some that the cover's a little bit bent, and I can just send you one. That'll be no problem.
Well, awesome, thank you. I
sure.
definitely don't expect that, but I just, his like that simplicity mentality of it. It's not a overcomplicated, like super crazy tactic and things. It's just like the persistence, finding those places, and the way he explains of getting those trails together. And I was watching a video, I think he had done it with the Southern Outdoorsman guys, where he was like backtracking the trails out and finding at the furthest points away where they were at, but they were still in bow range, and going through it. And it was just like looking at those funnels in a whole nother level of spending more time and versus just being like, oh, this is a good funnel, there's a good tree, actually spending that time in those places. And I put a lot of that in even my scouting this past spring, was going in areas I knew were good. And instead of like trying to cover 12 miles just to really say I covered 12 miles across the board, of spending 4 or 5 hours in these small areas and just really getting to know it better.
Yeah, dissecting the trail system.
Yeah.
That's what it's about, and finding some geographical feature like a big ditch, a bluff, a drainage that's forcing movement. And then you'll have 3 or 4 long range trails, and when these bucks are in the rut and they're up moving between does or before the does get going or towards the end of the rut, and it seems like with weather patterns nowadays that getting close to Thanksgiving, in the Midwest seems to be a little bit better than the 1st of November, especially when those big deer are looking, more for those last few does. The problem is a lot of them have been killed by then. So you do run into that. But I agree, with that philosophy for rut hunting. Certainly not the only way to kill deer. It's a way, and it's one that makes a lot of sense to me, and ones that I've implemented heavily over the last probably 4 years and have been really successful in the rut. I hear a lot of guys say, man, I hate the rut. I stink at the rut. I got deer running across highways, running across open fields, and all that's true. But man, when you are in a funnel that's forcing them to do that, if they're going from one big woodlot to another big woodlot, they don't have a choice. They have to come If they're going through there, they have to come through there. He only may do it one time.
Yeah.
Right. He may do it one time, but and that's where, the big thing is the persistence and staying there. He's got a graph in that class that he throws up on a board, and he goes, okay, the first one is just like 5 trails going across a piece of paper, if you will, or a topo. And then he throws a big ditch in it. And like 5 of the trails go around that ditch, and your odds have gone up like 40% or 60% on that particular thing because you've got that many more trails coming around that feature. And then he goes, okay, that's all fine and good, but let's say you're only able to hunt on the weekends. And then he takes like 3 of those buck trails out of there. You're only able to hunt once a day on the weekend. And it almost goes back to a shot in the dark, right? I mean, we got to get out there and go. But the persistence and being able to stick to those rut funnels during the rut is the key to that style of hunting and what I have found.